Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Hilly123 here, and it's time for me to discuss my top 10 music albums of the last decade, 2010, 2019. Did my favourite video games list last week, and it's now time to talk about my top 10 music albums. I'm going to give you guys the honourable mentions very quickly. By the way, we're in bed today, the covers are on, so please join me in bed whilst we discuss my top 10 music albums. Something you never thought I'd say, no, something you never wanted me to say either, but it is what it is. Anyway, My Bloody Valentine, MBV, 2013. Symphony X, Iconoclast, 2011. Alice in Chains, The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, 2013. AFX Twin, Cyro, 2014. Band of Horses, Infinite Arms, 2010. Buckethead, Shadows Between the Sky, 2010. Anathema, Weather Systems, 2012. Deftones, Koi no Yorken, 2012. Daft Punk, Random Access Memories, 2013. Alter Bridge, 2013. Fortress, I should say. Further Midland, Arrows and Anchors, 2011. Gorillaz, Plastic Beach, 2010. Carnival, Asymmetry, 2013. Massive Attack, Heligoland, 2010. Nevermore, The Obsidian Conspiracy, 2010. Nine Inch Nails, Hesitation Marks, 2013. Ocean Size, Self-Preserved While the Bodies Float Up, 2011. Opeth, Heritage, 2011. Paradise Lost, Tragic Idol, 2012. Pickering Pick, Tropic, 2013. Queens of the Stone Age, Like Clockwork, 2013. Riverside, Love, Fear and the Time Machine, 2015. Royal Blood, self-titled album, 2014. Rockstar, The Inevitable End, 2014. Sun Kill Moon, Admiral Fell Promises, 2010. Soundgarden, King Animal, 2012. Law, Ones and Sixes, 2015. And last one, Shop Leader 1, which is basically Square Pusher, Tom Jenkinson, his band, and an album which was called Demonstrator, I think from 2010, very underrated album, also that. So, wanted to get through those quickly, I wanted to keep this album concise. I'm going to try my best to skip through these albums very quickly, because I don't want it to be over 20 minutes, but I like to ramble. Anyway, it's been a quick start, let's get into this top 10, guys. Number 10, it is Grace for Drowning by Steven Wilson. This is his second studio album, the solo artist, and he put Porcupine Tree on hiatus in 2009. I got a Porcupine Tree poster behind my bald head there, and been in love with Steven Wilson and his music for a long time. I was close to putting The Raven That Refused to Sing on this list because perhaps it is a better album, but this album, Grace for Drowning from 2011, just means more to me. I was so hyped for it when it came out and to see where Wilson was going to go with his solo career, and where he went was in a more direction of King Crimson, bit of jazz influence, but some heavy metallic riffs as well, some poppy tracks. He's always been good at them, and it's just a great balance. It runs in at well over an hour in length, and there's a track here, 23 minutes, called Raider 2, which is a bit of a crazy track. I don't think it's a masterpiece just because it's a long track. With progressive rock, it's usually a long track, the masterpiece. Don't think Raider 2 is the masterpiece that people say it is, but there's some instrumentals on here that I love, some longer tracks, some beautiful bass playing, Mellotron no doubt as well, piano, and some great guest performances as well. Great album, and if you love progressive rock and never listen to Steven Wilson's music, please do. Grace for Drowning, number 10. Number 9, ladies and gentlemen, Le Fond Sauvage. Ooh, how do you like my French? That is French for The Wild Child, and it is the 5th studio album, a major label debut by the French progressive death metal band Gojira. Can't you tell? I'm reading off Wikipedia. And I've been a Gojira fan for about 10 years. About 10 years ago, I was listening to a lot more heavy music than I do now. And some of those bands I just don't listen to anymore, but Gojira are one of those that are standing the test of time for me. And From Mars to Sirius, released in 2005, is seen as the Magnus Opus. Have I just made that up? Magnum Opus. What the hell is Magnus Opus, you freaking moron? Anyway, it's been a long day at work. This is number 9 on my list, and this is just a great album. If you love heavy metal and you've never listened to Gojira, give it a listen right now. I'm not big into growl vocals, but Joe Duplantier, the vocalist, he does them in a way where you can understand a lot of what he's saying. So much aggression and power in the music. His brother Mario Duplantier is a drummer, and he's one of the best drummers in the world, in my opinion. But the lyrics are beautiful, very spiritual, a lot about climate change and global warming. These guys are true hippies, man, believe you me. Not really my bag, but you can't help but fall in love with what they're going for, and you can't help but fall in love with the sound and appreciate them. They are heavy enough that even the more cynical of metal fans, who are narrow-minded idiots, could like them. But also, I think there's a lot to enjoy. People that don't even listen to a lot of metal or death metal as well. There's a track on here called Born in Winter. That's one of my favourite tracks because it never quite gets going. But it's not a bad thing. It's like a hard rock song more than a metal song. And it's really kind of what I thought Magma, the last album, would be. But I didn't quite like that as much. And then there's absolute bangers, one called Planned Obsolescence, which is just one of the heaviest things I've ever heard in my life. And then there's this melancholic side, which has always been in Gojira's music. A track called The Gift of Guilt. It's absolutely beautiful. But yeah, riffs, solos, a few here and there. Drums are amazing, bass playing, and lyrically, really, really uplifting as well, because people who are narrow-minded and don't like this kind of music just think that all girl vocals must be about killing people and violence and all these horrendous things. With Gojira, couldn't be further from the truth, man. Number 9, La Font Sauvage by Gojira. We're still with the world of heavy metal, number 8, ladies and gentlemen. But it's the doomier edge, and that is because at number 8 we're talking about Ghost, with the debut album Opus Eponymous, which is Latin for the self-titled work. And this was released in 2010, right at the start of the decade, and I got into this the year after it came out. I think it was one Anthony Fantano, The Needle Drop, was talking about, and I checked it out, and I was just in love with it, because he spoke about how this album has influences from doom metal bands and bands like Black Sabbath, for example. I'm a huge Sabbath fan. I've got a Sabbath poster in my bedroom, and Ghost are a very popular band these days, but I don't think they've ever made an album as good as the first, because it's so concise, 34 minutes in length, ladies and gentlemen, really short for an album like this. Everything works though. I think this is a very consistent album. I think, yet again, like I said with Gojira, in terms of accessible, heavier music, this is definitely up there. Great vocals from Tobias Forge, the main guy of Ghost. But at the same time with the first album, that satanic exterior that they were showing off with the masks and everything, it was more believable, and even with the lyrics and the album cover, it's kind of been watered down within the last 3 albums. I still really like the second and third album, but the last album, Prequel, it was just too poppy for me, and there's not much going on, and not as much like reeling me back in to listen to the tracks. Whereas with this album, you could listen to it. I could listen to it right now and really, really enjoy it. There's a lot of these songs, I say a lot, there's 2 in Latin, and there's that Latin feel for whatever reason. And the feeling of a cult, you really feel that in this album so much. Elizabeth, love that track, or Elizabeth, as Tobias says. And Stand By Him, Satan Prayer, Death Knell, that's almost got a kind of scary feel to it. But my favourite track on this album is the instrumental called Genesis, and I did wonder, back when I listened to this album for the first time and fell in love with it, whether they were going to go to that style of music. It's called Genesis, that track. It's instrumental. It's got a beautiful guitar solo, and I was wondering whether they'd go into that progressive rock edge. But they haven't. Apparently the next album is going to be heavier and returning to the roots, but I have my doubts because so many bands say that. Still like the second and third album, but I love the first album. Ghost, Opus Eponymous. In at number 7, ladies and gentlemen, way back to 2011. These are all at the start of the decade, aren't they? It is Triple X by Mr. Danny Brown. And this was released, like I say, in 2011. And I got into Danny Brown in 2013 when about Old came out, a few months before his third album, Old, came out. And although Triple X is his second album, a lot of people probably think it's his first because it did so well for him. Critically acclaimed, and he's been getting better as the years gone by. Atrocity Exhibition was fantastic. And his new album, You Know What I'm Saying, that was back to basics, very minimal, but I actually really liked it. It didn't get bad reviews, it just didn't get quite as, amazing reviews across the board. But Triple X, the reason it's so good in my opinion, is because this album runs in at 53 minutes, there's 19 tracks on it, and don't get me wrong, there's a few missteps here and there, a few tracks that I'm not as happy to listen to all the time, a few tracks where I just think that's not a great track, that. But I can forgive it because the stronger tracks are amazing, and what I love about Danny is this album is mainly about how he's struggled to make it in the music industry, and how he struggled as a rapper down the years, and a lot of the insecurities he's had about his own talent, and the issues mentally that he's had, and the lifestyle that he's lived, and the drugs that he's taken, ladies and gentlemen. And this is him just singing about going off the rails and everything, but there's also that vulnerable side and the more melancholic side to him as well. And it's called Triple X. He was 30 at the time, but also I think it suits it because a lot of these songs on this album are very, very vulgar. A lot of sexual lyrics here, and Danny does not hold back in regards to that type of thing on this album. So if you're easily offended, this is not one for you. But the first proper track on the album, Die Like a Rockstar, has got some hilarious lyrics like "Bitch, I want to party like Chris Farley," "Drop a Hennessy," and then he says something else, talking about shrooms in my room, feeling like Keith Moon, got that Kurt Cobain kind of mind frame. It's just absolutely hilarious. All the celebrities who've died like a rock star, and that's basically him signing his own eulogy, really, saying this is how I'm going to go out. But of course, he hasn't yet, and hopefully he won't. But there's a lot of great tracks here, more kind of aggressive, typical rap songs, but also, like I say, that softer side to him as well. Danny is a rapper unlike any other. You see all these gangsters with the muscles and everything. He wears tight jeans, and he's a bit of a hipster, and he's into all kinds of different music. And if you never listened to Danny Brown's music, please, ladies and gentlemen, check him out. In at number 6, an album from 2015, and it's not the album that I got into the band with, but it's the third album, which really made them ultra popular. It is Tame Impala with Currents. And a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people, but there were certain fans and certain music reviewing websites and publications who weren't as keen on this album, but I absolutely loved it. And I mean, Tame Impala played psychedelic rock mainly the first 2 albums. Elephant was a massive tune, it was everywhere. But even though I did like those first 2 albums, I didn't love them, and I feel like there were inconsistencies on them. With Currents, I don't think it's inconsistent. I love this thing the whole way through. I think the production is incredible. Kevin Parker's vocals, fantastic. A lot of reverb. Bass is great. Guitar playing is still there and great. A lot of electronics going off. And there are 13 tracks on this album, and it runs in at 51 minutes, quite a lot going on, but I just find it so fun, and I find this album so addictive. There's just something special about this album, and no doubt next year I'm going to get it on vinyl, because I think it's one of my favourite modern albums for the last few years. And the new album, we're in November 2019 now, I'm really excited for it. The tracks so far that they've put onto YouTube have been good, and the album works beautiful as well. But yeah, my favourite track on this album, I know everyone knows it, but the less I know, the better. That bass line is utterly disgusting, and it's amazing. There's one song on here which people don't like called Past Life, but I just think it's a great idea. Listen to it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just dramatic. It really is cool. 'Cause I'm a Man, that is a great track. One to sing when you've had a few too many beers, ladies and gentlemen. But my favourite song of this album is 1 minute and 48 seconds long, a song called Disciples, which is one of the most addictive pieces of music I've ever heard. I absolutely adore it. But anyway, that's enough about that album. We're going to move on to number 5 now because I'm waffling. It is the second album by the American indie folk band, so Wikipedia say, Fleet Foxes, Helplessness Blues. And when I got into Fleet Foxes back in 2008, when I was 18, that was at a stage where I was getting into a lot of heavier music. So why did Fleet Foxes appeal to me? Because there was just something so genuine amongst a sea of shit indie bands. Something so genuine about these guys. Vocally, incredible. The harmony is beautiful. And you could just tell there was so much natural talent. And I remember listening to Winter Hymnal, and I was like, this is something special. Only 2 minutes, but those harmonies were beautiful. And Helplessness Blues, it was a bit more self-aware about the world around them, perhaps, with this album. But it wasn't overly political or anything. Still absolutely beautiful. Probably not quite as good, in my opinion, as the first self-titled debut album, but still really strong. Some fantastic performances here from the whole band. Lorelai, Helplessness Blues itself, Grown Ocean, Montezuma, Sim Saleh Bim, absolutely fantastic. Some shorter instrumental tracks here as well, showing off those finger-picking chops. Mr. Picknold and the rest of the guitarists in this band, there's quite a lot of them, and also by now a few former members. Joshua Tillman, who is known as Father John Misty, used to be in Fleet Foxes as well. But yeah, if you never listened to Fleet Foxes and you like folk music and kind of singer-songwriter stuff, you should really give them a listen, ladies and gentlemen. The last album, Crack Up, I didn't like quite as much. It wasn't as immediate, but I definitely think that was the vibe that they were going for. But Robin Pecknold has apparently shared some footage of music on Instagram, and it sounds a little bit more immediate, because it is immediate with the first two albums. The last album, a bit more experimental. I appreciate that. I still like it. Just didn't do it as much for me as the first two albums. But my fifth favourite album of the last decade, ladies and gentlemen, Fleet Foxes, Helplessness Blues. And now coming in at number 4 is the most recent one on this list, the most recent album on this list, only 2.5 years old. June 2017, ladies and gentlemen, the debut album by the American ambient pop band Cigarettes After Sex, or Cigarettes After Sexual Intercourse, or Cigarettes After Lovemaking for some people out there. And I got into this band just after this album came out. I actually saw it on, talking about Porcupine Tree before, Stephen Wilson on Spotify, his end of year list. Well, no, it wouldn't have been end of year list. It was definitely Wilson. It mustn't have been an end of year list, but it was on his list of favourite music. Maybe it was a monthly thing. And I don't know what hooked me in. I just remember listening to one of the tracks. So many bands and artists I was listening to and it's throwaway. But with these guys, something special with this album. It's so consistent, this album. It's very simplistic. It's very slow. There's kind of like spidery riffs. They're not strumming those guitars. It's just fantastic to listen to. It reminds me a little bit of Coldplay's first album when Parachutes came out. That lo-fi vibe, and I know there's so many other bands and artists that have done that, but when I got into Cigarettes After Sex, like I said, I've not got into much new music in the last few years. I remember getting into Coldplay when I was 10. I listened to Parachutes when I was 10, so I was really young. And I still think Parachutes is a really solid album. And obviously these days, in my opinion at least, Coldplay are way past the best. Viva La Vida was the last good album. But this reminded me of that album with that lo-fi kind of feel. But obviously, lyrically, this album, it's sweet and beautiful, and Greg Gonzalez, the lead singer, he's saying some nice things here, and then every so often he'll say something so vulgar that even Danny Brown, who we mentioned before, will be going, yeah. And there's a few tracks on here that are just on another level, and I'm so addicted to them even still. I can't get past this album. It's very simplistic, and the thing is, it's very, very samey. Now, Cigarettes After Sex released an album, the second album, called Cry. It came out, like I said, just about a month ago, and the reviews haven't been as good. I've listened to it quite a lot because obviously I was very excited, and it isn't as good as the first album. The songwriting's not quite as good, and there's a lot of repetition, like the choruses, verse, chorus, getting repeated more. There's less happening in the mix, but I can't deny there's still a few beautiful songs in there. But it's not as good as the first album. We're really interesting to see where they go from here, because they know that they're getting criticised now for the music sounding similar. In my opinion, if the quality is good, does it really matter? Because all these like Pitchfork, for example, are a bunch of wankers. Ripped the album apart, the second album, probably for other reasons other than it sounding similar to the first album. But if you're gonna criticise it for sounding the same as the first album, if the songs are still good, does it matter? Not every band needs to be like AC/DC and make the same album 40 years in a row, sure. But I think bands these days are a little bit quick to change the style of music that they play. And if something works, maybe you could make 2 or 3 albums worth of material before you move on and change. But yeah, K, Each Time You Fall in Love, Sunsets, Apocalypse, Flash, Sweet, Opera House, Truly, John Wayne, Young and Dumb. I love every single track I've just spoken of. There's a real hypnotic feel here, but my 2 favourites are Opera House and John Wayne. There's just something special about this album, and Opera House is probably the most melancholic track. It's very, very moving, and I'd say, and believable, and just fantastic. I love this album. Hope that they don't just water the music down now and make album after album of worse material, but I understand the criticisms of Cigarettes After Sex, but for me personally, I just adore this album, and it's fourth on my top 10 list of the decade. Anyway, number 3, ladies and gentlemen, we're running in at 20 minutes. My hope was that we'd keep this under 20 minutes, but I haven't. This is an album I've shown off on vinyl. This is an album I've spoke about probably in a few videos before when I've talked about music, and it is The Wild Hunt by the tallest man on earth. Thankfully, just made at the start of this decade, so I can put it at the start of this list. And he's a man who, in my opinion, since The Wild Hunt, has never quite reached this level again, but he's still made great music afterwards. But this is just a masterpiece in my opinion. The comparisons with Bob Dylan are undeniable, but he's his own man. He's a great singer-songwriter. There's some really good lyrics. A lot of his lyrics are a bit out there, not so obvious what he's talking about at times, but I really like that. I don't mind. And the particular track, Love Is All, let's just say that got me through some hard times. And there are a few reviews for this. Looking at the reviews now, like Enemy, a bunch of wankers, give it a 6 out of 10, and subsequently after the album's come out in the last 5 years, maybe people are not liking it as much perhaps, but I don't think time is going to erode what an amazing album this is. 34 minutes in length, only 10 tracks on the album. Pacing's great, lyrics great. His finger-picking guitar skills though are absolutely incredible. Nick Drake would be looking down, ladies and gentlemen, saying, this kid ain't bad at all. Because that's definitely one of his inspirations. But the Wild Hunt, Burden of Tomorrow, Troubles Will Be Gone, that song is beautiful. You're Going Back, The Drying of the Lawns, King of Spain, Love Is All, Thousand Ways, A Lion's Heart, Kids on the Run. And he's got these big booming vocals, of course. Christian Matson, the tallest man on earth. He's only about 5'7", 5'8" as well, ladies and gentlemen. So to be honest with you, he should be put in prison for lying. But with a big booming voice like that, you might feel like it's not intimate and kind of warm to listen to, but it certainly is, especially on the more melancholic tracks here, like Troubles Will Be Gone and A Lion's Heart. A Lion's Heart is so beautiful, and there's a tiny little bit of piano in the background on that track, and also Kids on the Run. The last track, Kids on the Run, would go to show the style that he would do after this album. And after this album, he hasn't been finger picking as much. It takes a lot of skill, and I'm going to be cynical here, but maybe he doesn't want to put that amount of skill and time into the music anymore, I'm not sure. But his last album, which was released last year, what was it called again? I Love You, It's a Fever Dream. It was better than Dark Birdie's Home. I'll be honest, I didn't like that album. But There's No Leaving Now, in 2012, the album after The Wild Hunt. Still really like that. But yeah, Dark Birdie's Home was full of electronics and full of bland tracks. I just couldn't get into it, ladies and gentlemen. But we're now going to talk about the top two, my top two albums of the 21st century, not 21st century decade, 2010, 2019, the last decade. And these albums so far, a lot of like big music fans might have heard these artists. You're going to have heard of the next two, but I'm biased. The next two are my favourite artists. Like, there's my favourite band, there's my favourite music duo ever. So I just quite simply had to put these in at number 2. And to be honest with you, I'm just going to say them both together and not as 1 and 2. It depends on how I feel, because they're both totally different kind of artists and bands. It's Boards of Canada with Tomorrow's Harvest, released in 2013, and it's Katatonia with Dead End Kings, released in 2012. You've got a alternative rock metal band there, and you've got an electronic duo, so totally different kinds of music, like I say. And if I had to say two artists whose music I've listened to more so than any other in the last 5 years, it's probably these two. I mean, I got into Katatonia in 2009, when Night Is the New Day came out, 3 years before the album I'm talking about here. And I got into Boards of Canada in 2011, 2 years before the album Tomorrow's Harvest came out. But the last 5 years has really cemented how much I love these two different artists. And these albums, I don't think they're the best they've ever done. I don't think Tomorrow's Harvest is the best Boards of Canada, and I don't think Dead End Kings is the best Katatonia album. But it's that vibe and style of music that I love from the both of them. Dead End Kings, it's melancholic, but there's heavy riffs, but it's a bit of doom as well. Though the kind of Getting a bit wheezy, ladies and gentlemen. Do apologise. They're the traditions of Katatonia. Some doomy, heavy riffs, but with clean vocals, and I think Dead End Kings is the last. It's only the second to last album. They've only made one album after that, but I think Great Cold Distance was the last Katatonia album, basically, which was more metal than rock. Dead End Kings is more rock than metal, but you can definitely see that they used to play heavier music and still could if they wished, because there's tracks like Buildings, which is absolutely monstrous. Dead Letters has got a riff that everyone says just sounds like Tool, and it does sound very Tool-y, but I love it. And lyrically, Katatonia have always been very vague with their lyrics, but the feel of the music is not vague. You know what it's all about. They've got me through some hard times. It's very cliche to say, but holy shit have they. And Jonas Rensk is one of my favourite people in music. I just absolutely love the man. Katatonia have got such an incredible discography. They're my favourite band, and the best thing I could say about them is they could go heavier on the next album and go back to the roots, or they could continue on this current vibe that they're on, which is a bit more trip hop and electronic, and I'd be happy either way. But yeah, Dead End Kings by Katatonia. If you love rock with a feeling of moodiness and melancholy, check it out. And Tomorrow's Harvest by Boards of Canada, if you want to talk about that now. Boards of Canada, I don't know where to begin to describe their music. It's not nostalgia for a time which you never lived through. A lot of people say that, but a lot of people who lived through the 1970s say that their music reminds them of their childhood, and about film soundtracks as well. And the style of music that they play, there are other artists that are similar to Boards of Canada, but none get as close. And people say it's the darkest, most abstract thing they've done, Tomorrow's Harvest, but Geo Gaddy, which was released in 2002, was weird and unsettling and dark. Tomorrow's Harvest is dark, but it's not weird and kind of all over the place. Geo Gaddy's all over the place. It's longer as an album, longer tracks. Tomorrow's Harvest just has a feeling of, as the album would suggest, the end of the world. It says about highlighting themes of isolation and decay. And I get the feeling with Boards of Canada that the music has never wanted to portray an emotion that much. Like, they make the music, people say it sounds, like wildlife, like nostalgia, old commercials and old educational videotapes, because that's where Boards of Canada comes from if you research the band. But with Tomorrow's Harvest, I get the feeling that the band were kind of communicating to ourselves as listeners for the first ever time about perhaps the grim thoughts on the way that the world is today. And I absolutely love that. I remember listening to the album for the first time on YouTube, because the band put it live onto YouTube with these fantastic backdrops of desolate locations, which were brilliant for the album. And I remember thinking, holy shit, these guys have done it again. I'm falling in love. And it's now nearly 7 years since Tomorrow's Harvest came out. Between the Campfire Head phase, it was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years there. So hopefully next year we will get some news on the new Boards of Canada album. But ladies and gentlemen, if anyone has watched this, I thank you very much. You're a crazy, crazy human being, but thank you anyway. This has been my top 10 music albums of the decade. And yeah, the joint best, Tomorrow's Harvest, Boards of Canada, and Dead End Kings by Katatonia. I do apologise, this last 10 minutes I've been really struggling. I'm feeling so wheezy. I just want to cough all the time. I've been talking all day, and then I do it on a video like this. You know, it just immediately gets worse for some reason. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.